11:47 p.m. The penthouse kitchen should have been empty. Marcus Hayes pushed open the door, toolbox in hand, expecting marble counters and a dripping faucet. Instead, he found his boss on the floor. Victoria Sterling, the CEO who never smiled, who ended careers with one glance, who terrified entire boardrooms, sat crumpled in silk pajamas, arms locked around her knees, shoulders shaking in the half-light. A single candle burned on a birthday cake meant for no one. Behind her, a photograph clung to the wall, a little girl with dark curls and a smile that looked hauntingly familiar. Victoria's head jerked up. Mascara streaked down her porcelain face like war paint dissolving in defeat. Their eyes locked. His toolbox hit the floor, metal clanging against tile, shattering the sacred silence. She didn't scream, didn't order him out. Her voice came out broken, barely above a whisper, and the words sliced through him like glass. Please forget what you saw here. But Marcus couldn't forget. Not the rawness in her eyes, not the child's worn bracelet peeking from beneath her sleeve, and certainly not the truth that this moment would crack open, that the most powerful woman he'd ever known was carrying a grief so heavy it had been slowly killing her in silence. Marcus had been working at Sterling Technologies for 3 years, fixing broken things in a building full of people who barely noticed he existed. He wore the same navy blue uniform every day, carried the same dented toolbox his father had given him before the old man's heart gave out, and moved through the gleaming corridors like a ghost. Most employees didn't bother learning his name. To them, he was just the maintenance guy. The one who showed up when something stopped working and disappeared the moment it was fixed. That invisibility suited him fine. After Sarah passed 4 years ago, he'd learned to find comfort in being overlooked. It meant fewer questions about the dark circles under his eyes, or why his daughter's lunchbox was always packed with mismatched snacks. It meant he could focus on what mattered, keeping his head down, earning a paycheck, and making sure his 6-year-old daughter, Emma, never doubted that she was loved. The emergency call had come through at 11:15 that night while he was helping Emma with her bedtime routine. She'd been upset because she couldn't draw a perfect rainbow for her art project, and he'd spent 20 minutes sitting beside her, guiding her small hand with his calloused one, showing her how imperfections could be beautiful too. His phone buzzed just as she finally smiled. The building manager's voice was tense. Water damage in the penthouse. Urgent repair needed. CEO personally requested the best technician. Marcus had kissed Emma's forehead, promised Mrs. Rodriguez next door would check on her every 30 minutes, and driven through empty streets wondering what kind of emergency couldn't wait until morning. He'd worked on Victoria Sterling's floor before, replacing light fixtures and unclogging drains, but he'd never been to her private residence. The woman was a legend in the building. 31 years old and already running a tech empire, featured in magazines with headlines about her ruthless business strategies and her refusal to discuss anything personal. People whispered that she was brilliant but cold, that she'd turned down acquisition offers worth billions because she wouldn't compromise her vision. Someone in the break room once joked that Victoria Sterling didn't have a heart. She had a processor instead. The penthouse elevator required a special key card. The building manager had given it to him with strict instructions. Fix the problem, don't touch anything else, and absolutely do not disturb Ms. Sterling. The doors opened to reveal a space that looked more like a museum than a home. White walls, minimalist furniture, everything arranged with mathematical precision. There were no photographs on display, no clutter, no signs that an actual human being lived there. The silence pressed against his eardrums. He'd found the kitchen easily enough, following the sound of dripping water. And that's when he'd pushed open the wrong door, the second door, not the maintenance closet, the one that led to Victoria Sterling's private sanctuary. The one that revealed the woman behind the armor was breaking apart in ways nobody was supposed to see. Now standing frozen in the doorway with his toolbox scattered at his feet, Marcus watched as Victoria Sterling transformed. The vulnerability vanished like smoke. She rose to her feet with the mechanical precision of someone who'd practiced hiding pain until it became muscle memory. Her hands moved to smooth her hair, to wipe her face, to rebuild the fortress, but her fingers trembled. The birthday cake sat between them like evidence of something forbidden. Chocolate frosting, a single candle burned down to a nub, and piped letters that read "Happy Birthday, Lily" in pink icing. The photograph on the wall showed the same little girl, maybe 4 years old, laughing in a park with her arms wrapped around a younger version of Victoria. The resemblance was unmistakable. Same dark curls, same delicate features, same eyes that seemed to hold entire universes. Marcus's throat tightened. He knew that look in Victoria's eyes because he'd seen it in his own mirror every morning for 4 years. It was the look of someone who'd lost the person they loved most and had no idea how to keep living anyway. His voice came out rough. "I'm sorry. The building manager said the kitchen. I thought—" Victoria held up one hand, cutting him off. Her face had gone blank, all traces of emotion locked away behind a mask so perfect it could have been carved from ice. "The leak is in the other room, through that door. Fix it and leave." She turned away from him, her spine rigid, and began gathering up the birthday cake with hands that still shook despite her best efforts. Marcus wanted to say something, anything, to acknowledge what he'd witnessed, but the words stuck in his chest. He'd learned enough about grief to know that sometimes the kindest thing you could do was pretend you hadn't seen someone shatter. So he picked up his tools, walked to the correct door, and spent the next hour replacing a corroded pipe beneath the sink, while the image of Victoria Sterling crying alone on her kitchen floor burned itself into his memory. When he finished, she was gone. The cake was gone. The photograph remained, but it had been turned to face the wall, as if even that small connection to the past was too much to bear. He left a handwritten note on the counter with his work order number and drove home through streets that felt emptier than before. Emma was asleep when he checked on her, curled up with the stuffed rabbit Sarah had made during her last months. Marcus stood in the doorway of his daughter's room, watching her breathe, and thought about the woman in the penthouse who'd once had a daughter too. He thought about the worn bracelet on Victoria's wrist, sized for a child's hand. He thought about how grief didn't care if you were powerful or poor, famous or forgotten. It found you anyway, and it stayed as long as it wanted. That night, he didn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle, and wondering if Victoria Sterling was doing the same thing 20 floors above the city, alone with her ghosts and her birthday cake meant for a little girl who would never grow old. The next morning, Marcus expected nothing to change. He showed up to work at 7, checked the maintenance schedule, and started his rounds. But when he walked past the executive floor, he felt it, a shift in the air like the moment before lightning strikes. Victoria Sterling emerged from her office, and for a fraction of a second their eyes met across the glass-walled corridor. She looked away first, her expression unreadable. But Marcus saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her hand moved unconsciously to touch the bracelet hidden beneath her sleeve. She didn't acknowledge him, didn't slow her stride, but that moment of eye contact felt like a hook lodged in his chest, pulling tight every time he thought about looking away. Something had shifted between them, something neither of them knew how to name yet. He spent the rest of the week trying to avoid her, taking the service stairs instead of the main elevators, timing his work orders to stay clear of the executive floor. It didn't matter. The universe, or fate, or whatever cosmic force enjoyed making people uncomfortable, kept throwing them together in small, impossible ways. 3 days after the incident, Marcus was repairing a jammed printer on the 3rd floor when Emma's daycare called. His daughter had fallen on the playground. Nothing serious, but she was scared and crying and asking for him. He explained the situation to his supervisor, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the exit. The elevator was empty when he stepped inside, but it stopped on the executive floor. The doors opened. Victoria Sterling stood there, perfectly composed in a charcoal suit, tablet in hand, every inch the untouchable CEO. She glanced at him, then at the elevator panel, and for a moment he thought she'd wait for the next one. Instead, she stepped inside. The doors closed. They stood in silence as the elevator descended, the numbers ticking down with agonizing slowness. Marcus could smell her perfume, something expensive and subtle, like winter air and crushed pine needles. His phone buzzed with another text from the daycare. Emma's teacher had sent a photo, his daughter sitting on a bench, knees scraped, tears streaking her face, holding the rainbow drawing she'd finished. His heart clenched. Victoria's voice startled him. "Is everything all right?" He looked up to find her watching him, and for the first time since that night, her expression wasn't carefully blank. There was something softer there, almost concerned, though she seemed surprised by her own question. My daughter, she fell. Nothing serious, but she's upset. He held up the phone so she could see the picture. Victoria's entire body went still. She stared at the photo of Emma with an intensity that made Marcus uncomfortable, like she was memorizing every detail. The curls escaping from a messy ponytail, the gap-toothed smile trying to be brave, the rainbow clutched like a lifeline. Her hand moved to her bracelet again, twisting it once, twice. When she finally spoke, her voice had gone quiet. How old is she? Marcus hesitated, sensing he was stepping into territory he didn't understand. 6, just turned 6 in September. Something flickered across Victoria's face. There and gone so fast he almost missed it. Pain, raw and immediate, like someone had pressed on a wound that never healed. The elevator dinged, announcing the lobby. Victoria blinked and the mask slid back into place. I hope she feels better soon. She walked away without another word, leaving Marcus standing in the elevator with the unsettling feeling that he'd just witnessed something important, though he couldn't explain what. Over the next 2 weeks, he started noticing things he'd never paid attention to before. Victoria arrived at the office before everyone else and left long after the building had emptied. She never ate lunch in the cafeteria, never joined the other executives for their Friday happy hours, never seemed to have anyone waiting for her. When she walked to her car, she existed in a bubble of perfect isolation, untouchable and alone. But Marcus also noticed the small cracks in her armor, the way her face softened when she passed the company's small daycare center, where a few employees' children played during after-school hours, the way she paused near the window overlooking the playground, watching the kids chase each other, her hand always finding that bracelet. Once he saw her kneel down to help a little boy who dropped his toy cars across the hallway, gathering them up with a gentleness that didn't match her reputation. The boy had thanked her and run off, and Victoria had remained crouched there for a long moment, staring at her empty hands like she'd forgotten what they were for. Emma started asking about his work more often. She'd always been curious, but lately her questions had a sharper focus. Who do you work for? What's she like? Is she nice? Marcus tried to explain that he didn't really work for Victoria Sterling directly, that he barely knew her. But Emma had seen the photo on the company website during a school project about parents' jobs. She'd declared that Ms. Sterling looked sad but pretty and decided, with the certainty only 6-year-olds possess, that someone should make her smile. Marcus had laughed it off at the time, but now the comment haunted him. His daughter, who'd never met Victoria, had seen something in a corporate headshot that hundreds of employees missed every day. Maybe children were better at recognizing their own kind, other people carrying invisible wounds, other hearts learning to beat around the holes left by loss. The second turning point came on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after that night in the penthouse. Marcus was replacing burnt-out bulbs in the parking garage when he heard Ray's voices echoing off the concrete. He recognized Victoria's voice immediately, sharp and commanding, and a man's voice responding with equal force. You can't keep living like this, Victoria. It's been 5 years. 5 years of watching you destroy yourself. Marcus knew he should leave, should give them privacy. But something in the man's tone, not quite cruel but not kind either, made him hesitate. He moved closer to the stairwell, staying out of sight. Victoria's voice came tight. I'm not destroying myself. I'm running a successful company. I'm doing exactly what I should be doing. The man laughed, bitter and sharp. You're hiding. There's a difference. When was the last time you let yourself feel anything? When was the last time you even said her name out loud? Silence, then Victoria's voice, so quiet Marcus almost missed it. Don't. Please don't. The man sighed, heavy with exhaustion. I loved her too, you know. She was my niece. But Lily wouldn't want this for you. She wouldn't want you to stop. The word cracked like a whip. You don't get to tell me what she would have wanted. You don't get to stand there and pretend you understand what it's like to... Her voice broke. Marcus heard footsteps, rapid and uneven, like someone running. The man called after her, but she didn't stop. Marcus pressed himself against the wall as Victoria rushed past, her face buried in her hands, moving blindly toward the exit. The man followed a moment later, late 50s, expensive suit, the same dark hair as Victoria threaded with gray. He looked exhausted and sad. And when he passed Marcus's hiding spot, he shook his head and muttered something that sounded like, stubborn, just like her father. Marcus waited until they were both gone before emerging. His hands were shaking. He'd pieced together enough now to understand the shape of Victoria's grief, even if he didn't know all the details. A daughter named Lily, gone for 5 years. A family that tried to help but didn't know how. And a woman who'd built walls so high and thick that she was suffocating inside them, alone in a prison of her own making. That night he told Emma a story, not a fairy tale, but something closer to the truth, about a queen who lived in a tall tower and forgot how to smile. Emma listened with her serious face on, the one she wore when she was thinking hard about something important. When he finished, she asked the question he'd been dreading. Why doesn't anyone help her, Daddy? Marcus tucked the blanket around her shoulders, searching for an answer that would make sense to a 6-year-old. Sometimes people don't know how to ask for help, or they think they don't deserve it. Emma frowned, considering this. Then she scrambled out of bed, grabbed her crayons and construction paper, and started drawing with the focused intensity she brought to all her art projects. She worked for 20 minutes while Marcus watched, bemused, until she held up her creation. A rainbow, bright and cheerful, with "You are not alone," written in her careful first-grade handwriting at the bottom. She'd drawn 2 stick figures holding hands beneath the rainbow, one tall with dark hair, one small with curls. Can you give this to the sad queen? Maybe it will help. Her eyes were moist and earnest, full of that particular brand of hope that children carried before the world taught them cynicism. Marcus's throat tightened. He thought about explaining why that might not be appropriate, why Victoria Sterling probably wouldn't appreciate a child's drawing, why it was better to leave well enough alone. But then he thought about the birthday cake with Lily's name, the photograph turned to face the wall, the woman crying alone in her empty penthouse. He thought about how Sarah used to say that small kindnesses could save lives, even when you couldn't see the impact right away. Yeah, sweetheart, I'll make sure she gets it. The next morning, before his shift started, Marcus rode the elevator to the executive floor with Emma's rainbow tucked inside a manila envelope. The administrative assistant, a brisk woman named Patricia Chen, who usually treated him like furniture, gave him a suspicious look when he approached her desk. I need to deliver something to Ms. Sterling. It's personal. Patricia's eyebrows rose. Ms. Sterling doesn't accept personal deliveries. Marcus met her gaze steadily. She'll want this one, trust me. Something in his expression must have convinced her, because after a long moment she took the envelope and nodded. I'll see that she gets it. He tried not to think about it for the rest of the day, focusing instead on his work orders and staying busy enough that his mind couldn't wander. But at 4:30 that afternoon, his supervisor called him into the office with an odd expression. You've been requested. Penthouse. Ms. Sterling specifically asked for you. He slid a work order across the desk. Marcus's heart kicked hard against his ribs. He took the work order, noted the vague description, minor repair needed, and headed for the elevator with the feeling of walking towards something inevitable. The penthouse was different in daylight. Sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, making the white walls glow, transforming the space from a mausoleum into something almost welcoming. Victoria stood at the window overlooking the city, still wearing her work clothes, but with her jacket draped over a chair, her shoulders less rigid than usual. She didn't turn when he entered. There's nothing broken. Marcus stopped at the middle of the room, toolbox in hand, waiting. After a long moment, Victoria turned to face him. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry, and she was holding Emma's rainbow drawing like it was made of glass. Your daughter drew this. It wasn't a question, but Marcus nodded anyway. She wanted you to have it. She thought you looked sad. Victoria's fingers traced the stick figures at the bottom of the page, the 2 hands joined together in crayon solidarity. Children see things adults miss. They haven't learned to look away yet. She moved to the kitchen, to the same counter where Marcus had left his work order 3 weeks ago, and set the drawing down carefully. Then she did something unexpected. She pulled out a photograph from her pocket. Not the one from the wall, but a smaller one, worn soft at the edges from being carried everywhere. This is Lily. She held it out. Marcus approached slowly, like he might with a wounded animal, and took the photo. The little girl was beautiful, 4 years old, maybe 5, with Victoria's dark curls and a smile that lit up the whole world. She was wearing a yellow dress and holding a rainbow pinwheel, frozen forever in a moment of pure, uncomplicated joy. Victoria's voice was steady now, like she'd been holding these words inside for so long that they needed to come out or suffocate her. She loved rainbows. Every time it rained, she'd run to the window and wait for one to appear. She believed they were magic bridges that connected sad people to happy ones. Marcus handed the photo back carefully, understanding now why Emma's drawing had broken through Victoria's defenses. What happened? He wasn't sure he had the right to ask, but Victoria sank into one of the kitchen chairs, suddenly looking exhausted. Car accident 5 years ago. I was driving. We were going to her ballet recital. She paused, her hands gripping the edge of the table. A truck ran a red light. I walked away with bruises. She didn't walk away at all. The words fell into the space between them like stones into water, creating ripples that spread and spread. Marcus pulled out the chair across from her and sat down, giving her silence to fill or not, whatever she needed. After a moment, Victoria continued. My husband, ex-husband now, blamed me. Said I was distracted, checking work emails while driving. Maybe he was right. Maybe if I'd been paying more attention, I could have swerved differently, done something, anything. Her laugh was bitter. The divorce was final 6 months after we buried her. He moved to Boston, started a new family, got a chance to try again. I just stayed here, kept working, kept pretending that if I could just build something big enough, successful enough, it would fill the hole she left behind. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Marcus saw past the CEO, past the Ice Queen, to the mother who'd lost everything. Obviously, that's working out great. Marcus thought about the last 4 years of his life, about the nights he'd spent staring at Sarah's clothes in the closet, unable to donate them or throw them away, about the times he'd caught himself setting the table for 3 people instead of 2, about how he'd thrown himself into being the perfect single father, as if loving Emma hard enough could somehow make up for her not having a mother. After my wife died, I thought the pain would kill me. Some days I almost wished it would, except I had Emma depending on me. His voice came out rough with memory. For a long time, I just went through the motions. Wake up, feed her, drop her off at daycare, work, pick her up, make dinner, help with homework. Bedtime, repeat. I was so focused on surviving that I forgot how to actually live. Victoria looked at him with those dark, haunted eyes. Does it get easier? The question hung in the air between them, honest and raw. Marcus considered Tiang, offering her the comfortable platitudes people had offered him. Instead, he told her the truth. No, but it gets different. The grief doesn't shrink. You just grow around it. And some days you find moments where you can breathe again without it hurting quite so much. They sat in silence for a while, 2 people who'd loved and lost, who'd been crushed by the weight of it and were somehow still standing. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Victoria finally spoke again, her voice softer now. I haven't said her name out loud in 3 years, Lily. My brother, the man you probably heard me arguing with in the parking garage. He keeps trying to get me to talk about her, to see a therapist, to join a support group. But every time I try, it feels like I'm letting her go. Like if I stop hurting, it means she didn't matter. Marcus understood that logic because he'd used it himself, had worn his grief like armor to prove that Sarah had been real and important and worth mourning. Emma asks about her mom sometimes, and I've learned that talking about the happy memories doesn't mean I'm forgetting the sad ones. It just means I'm letting her exist in more than one dimension. She was more than how she died. She was how she lived too. Victoria wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture so unguarded it made her look younger, more human. I don't know how to do that. Be normal again. Let people in. She was everything, my whole world. When she died, I died too. She gestured at herself, at the pristine penthouse, at the empire she'd built. This is just a ghost going through the motions. Marcus leaned forward, his work-roughened hands clasped on the table. Then maybe it's time to start haunting differently. Not alone, not in silence, The words surprised him as much as they seemed to surprise her. This wasn't his business. He was just the maintenance guy, the invisible man who fixed broken pipes and changed light bulbs. But somehow in this moment, sitting across from a woman who'd forgotten how to be anything except perfect and in control, he felt like maybe he could offer something more valuable than plumbing skills. Maybe he could offer proof that it was possible to survive the unsurvivable, that grief didn't have to be a solitary sentence. Before Victoria could respond, before either of them could second-guess what was happening, Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Rodriguez. Emma was asking for him, wanted to show him something important. He stood reluctantly. "I should go, my daughter." "Wait." Victoria stood too, suddenly looking uncertain, like someone who'd forgotten how to ask for what she needed. Could you bring her here sometime? Your daughter. I'd like to thank her for the drawing in person." Marcus studied her face, looking for signs that this was a bad idea, that he was crossing a line that would end badly for both of them. But all he saw was a lonely woman who'd been locked away from the world for too long, reaching out tentatively for a connection, for something real. She'd like that. Emma's got more questions than sense sometimes, but she's got a good heart. She'd be honored to meet you. Something shifted in Victoria's expression. Not quite a smile, but close, like muscles remembering how the motion worked. "Saturday afternoon, I could order pizza. Emma can tell me about her rainbow theory." Marcus felt something warm unfold in his chest, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, maybe, or the beginning of it. Saturday works. As he turned to leave, his eyes caught on something he hadn't noticed before. A large envelope on Victoria's desk, partially hidden beneath a stack of reports. The return address was visible. Whitmore and Associates, Boston, MA. Legal firm letterhead. Victoria hadn't opened it yet, but Marcus could see her name typed on the front in formal business font. He didn't mention it. Whatever it wasn't his concern. But something about that envelope made his stomach tighten with unease. A premonition he couldn't name. Victoria followed his gaze and her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She walked him to the door, her hand once again finding that bracelet beneath her sleeve. "Thank you for the drawing, for..." She didn't finish, but Marcus nodded. He understood what she couldn't say. For seeing her, for not running away, for offering a sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, it was possible to be something more than the sum of your worst days. He left the penthouse feeling like the ground beneath his feet had shifted. Like he'd stepped through a door he hadn't known was there, and found himself in unfamiliar but not unwelcome territory. The elevator descended slowly, and Marcus thought about Saturday, about Emma's excited face when he told her she'd get to meet the sad queen from the story. He thought about Victoria's trembling hands holding that rainbow drawing like it was made of something precious and breakable. But he also thought about that envelope with the Boston return address, still sealed on her desk. About the way Victoria's expression had shuddered when she'd noticed him looking at it. About the tension that had suddenly flooded back into her shoulders. Some doors, once opened, couldn't be closed again. Marcus wondered if he'd just walked through one that would change everything, for better or worse. The weight of that uncertainty pressed against his chest as the elevator reached the ground floor, and the doors slid open to the lobby, to the ordinary world where maintenance men didn't sit in kitchens with billionaire CEOs and talk about dead daughters and grief that refused to heal. He stepped out into the familiar corridor, but nothing felt familiar anymore. Everything had shifted 3 degrees to the left, just enough to make him question what he thought he knew about boundaries and appropriate behavior and the careful distance he'd maintained between himself and the people who actually mattered in this building. Emma would be waiting for him at home, probably with another drawing already started, her crayons spread across the kitchen table in organized chaos. Mrs. Rodriguez would have fed her dinner, something sensible and warm, and made sure her homework was done. His life would continue in its predictable pattern, the same routine he'd perfected over 4 years of single fatherhood. Except now there was Saturday. Now there was Victoria Sterling's voice saying Emma's name like it meant something. Now there was the possibility that grief didn't have to be permanent isolation. That maybe 2 people who'd been broken by loss could figure out how to exist in the same room without their jagged edges cutting each other to pieces. Marcus pushed through the lobby doors into the Chicago evening, the October air sharp against his face. Somewhere 20 floors above him, Victoria Sterling was probably standing at her window, looking down at the city lights, holding a child's rainbow drawing, and trying to remember what it felt like to believe in magic bridges between sad people and happy ones. And somewhere in Boston, in a law office Marcus had never heard of, someone had sent an envelope that Victoria was afraid to open. Marcus didn't know what was in that envelope, didn't know what threat or demand or painful reminder it contained. But he knew the look he'd seen flash across Victoria's face when she'd noticed it, the look of someone bracing for impact, preparing for the next blow in a series of blows that had been raining down for 5 years. He drove home through streets painted orange by streetlights, past neighborhoods where families sat down to dinner together, past parks where kids played until their parents called them in. Ordinary lives, ordinary griefs, ordinary joys. Nothing like the strange territory he had just stepped into with a woman who ran a billion-dollar company and cried alone on her kitchen floor on her dead daughter's birthday. When he pulled into his driveway, Emma was already at the window, face pressed against the glass, waving frantically. Mrs. Rodriguez stood behind her, patient and smiling. Marcus waved back, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility settle over his shoulders. The weight of being everything this little girl had left, of being enough when he often felt like he was barely holding it together. But tonight there was something new mixed in with that weight. A lightness he hadn't expected. A sense that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as alone in this as he'd thought. That somewhere in this city, someone else understood what it felt like to wake up every morning and choose to keep going when the easiest thing would be to stop. Saturday was 3 days away. 3 days to prepare Emma for meeting someone important. 3 days for Victoria to change her mind, to retreat back behind her walls, to decide that letting two strangers into her pristine penthouse was too much, too fast, too dangerous. 3 days for Marcus to second-guess every word he'd said, every boundary he'd crossed. But as he walked up the path to his front door, as Emma flung it open and launched herself into his arms, talking a mile a minute about the new drawing she'd started, Marcus made a decision. He was going to show up on Saturday. He was going to bring his daughter in a genuine smile and the understanding that whatever happened next, at least they'd tried. At least they'd reached out across the enormous divide between a maintenance worker and a CEO, between two people drowning in grief, and seen if maybe they could pull each other towards shore. Saturday arrived cold and bright, one of those autumn days when Chicago seemed sharper, somehow, more vivid. Emma had insisted on wearing her favorite purple dress and the sparkly shoes that usually only came out for special occasions. She clutched a new drawing she'd made, this one featuring 3 stoic figures and a rainbow twice as big as before. Marcus had tried to manage her expectations all morning, explaining that Miss Sterling was very busy and important, that they shouldn't stay too long, that she probably wouldn't want to play. Emma had listened with her serious face and then asked the question that had stopped him cold. "Is she the queen from the story you told me? The one who lives in the tower?" He'd knelt down to her eye level, tucking a curl behind her ear. "Yes, sweetheart, something like that." Emma had nodded, satisfied, and taken his hand, then will help her remember how to smile again. Now standing outside the penthouse door with his daughter bouncing on her toes beside him, Marcus wondered if this was a terrible mistake. But before he could reconsider, the door opened. Victoria stood there in jeans and a soft sweater, her hair down instead of pulled back in its usual severe style. She looked more like a real person than he'd ever seen her, and the nervousness in her eyes was almost endearing. Emma didn't give Marcus time to manage introductions. "Hi, I'm Emma, and I'm 6 years old, and I drew you another rainbow because Daddy said you liked the first one, and that's a really pretty bracelet, and are you really a queen?" The words tumbled out in one breathless rush. Victoria blinked, clearly startled by the onslaught, and then something miraculous happened. She laughed, actually laughed, a sound so genuine and surprised that it transformed her entire face. "I'm not a queen, but thank you. I love your dress. Purple is a wonderful color." Emma beamed and held out her drawing. "This one's even better. See, there's you and me and Daddy, and we're all standing under the rainbow so the sad feelings can wash away." Victoria took the drawing with careful hands, studying it like it was a masterpiece in a museum. Her eyes went bright with tears, but she was smiling too. When she looked up at Marcus, he saw something in her face that made his breath catch. Gratitude, yes, but also something deeper. Recognition, a mirror of his own struggle to keep living when living hurt so much. It's perfect. Seriously, the most beautiful rainbow I've ever seen. Would you like to help me hang it on my refrigerator? Emma nodded enthusiastically and took Victoria's offered hand like they'd known each other forever, chattering away about her art teacher and her friend who could draw horses and how she wanted to paint her whole room rainbow colors. But Daddy said that was too much. Marcus followed them inside, watching as his daughter's natural exuberance slowly chipped away at Victoria's careful composure. By the time the pizza arrived, Emma had learned that Victoria liked pepperoni and hated mushrooms, that she'd never had a pet but always wanted a dog, that she knew how to say hello in 6 different languages. Victoria had learned that Emma's favorite color changed daily, that she wanted to be an artist, or maybe a veterinarian or possibly both, that she missed her mommy but knew she was watching from heaven with the angels. The conversation flowed easily, Emma asking questions with the fearless curiosity of childhood, Victoria answering with increasing warmth. And then, over a half-eaten slice of pizza, Emma asked the question Marcus had been dreading. "Do you have any kids, Miss Sterling?" The room went very quiet. Marcus opened his mouth to redirect, to save Victoria from having to answer, but she held up one hand to stop him. She set down her pizza carefully, wiped her hands on a napkin, and looked at Emma with an expression that was both sad and serene. "I did. I had a daughter named Lily. She would have been 9 years old now." But dear Emma processed this with the matter-of-fact acceptance children bring to difficult truths. "Did she go to heaven with my mommy?" Victoria's voice wavered. "Yes, I think she did." Emma nodded, satisfied with this answer. "That's good. Mommy needs friends too. She gets lonely sometimes. Daddy told me." She paused, tilting her head. "Do you get lonely?" Victoria glanced at Marcus, her eyes shining, and he saw the exact moment she decided to stop pretending. "Yes, I get very lonely." Emma slid off her chair and walked around the table to where Victoria sat. Without asking permission, she climbed into Victoria's lap and wrapped her arms around her neck in a fierce hug. "You don't have to be lonely anymore. Me and Daddy are good at keeping people company." "Right, Daddy." Marcus's throat was too tight to answer right away. He watched Victoria's face crumple, watched her arms come up slowly to hold his daughter, watched tears slip down her cheeks as she buried her face in Emma's curls. It was the kind of moment that felt too private to witness and too important to look away from. "Right, we're pretty good at that." They stayed for hours. Emma insisted on showing Victoria her entire collection of drawings, which Marcus had brought along in a folder, and Victoria examined each one with genuine interest, asking questions about color choices and inspiration. At some point, they ended up on the floor of the living room, Emma demonstrating her very serious technique for drawing perfect clouds while Victoria and Marcus sat on the couch watching. "Thank you for this, for letting me." Victoria's voice was quiet, meant only for him. She trailed off, but Marcus understood what she couldn't say. For letting her be human again. For giving her a reason to treat. She's got a gift for seeing people. Really seeing them, not just the masks they wear. He paused, then added, "She thinks you're special." Victoria's smile was tremulous but real. The feeling's mutual. They watched Emma work in comfortable silence for a moment before Victoria spoke again. "I've been thinking about what you said, about grief making us grow around it rather than shrinking. I want to try. I want to—" She took a shaky breath. "I want to stop punishing myself. Lily wouldn't want this. She'd want me to be happy, to live, to let people in. I know that. I've always known it. I just didn't know how to start." Marcus turned to look at her fully. "So start small. Start with pizza on Saturdays and rainbow drawings on your fridge. Start with saying her name and remembering the good parts. Start with letting yourself be more than your pain." As if summoned by the moment, Emma looked up from her drawing and announced, "Miss Sterling, you should come to the park with us tomorrow. We go every Sunday and feed the ducks, and Daddy pushes me on the swings. You can come too. It'll be fun." Victoria looked at Marcus, uncertainty flickering across her face, silently asking if this was okay. if he minded his carefully constructed life expanding to include her. He gave a small nod. Whatever this was, friendship, connection, two broken people learning to prop each other up, it felt right in a way nothing had felt right in a long time. I'd love to. That Sunday and many Sundays after became a new kind of normal. Victoria showed up at the park in casual clothes that made her look younger, less guarded, and walked beside Marcus while Emma raced ahead to the duck pond. They talked about everything and nothing, work, weather, movies they'd seen, books they'd read, but they also talked about the hard things, the real things, sharing their grief like a burden that became lighter when divided between two pairs of shoulders. Victoria still hadn't opened the envelope from Daniel's lawyers, the one Marcus had noticed that first day. She'd mentioned it once, casually, like it was just another piece of mail she was avoiding. He didn't push. Some battles required readiness, and Victoria was still learning how to stop running from fights. Victoria told him about Lily's obsession with fairy tales, how she'd insisted on wearing princess dresses to preschool every day. Marcus told her about Sarah's terrible jokes and her uncanny ability to burn even the simplest dinners. They laughed and cried and slowly, gradually began to heal. At work, things changed too, but subtly. Victoria still ran her company with fierce intelligence and high standards, but there was a softness now that hadn't been there before. She remembered people's names, asked about their families, sometimes even smiled in meetings. The employees noticed. Patricia Chen, the assistant, cornered Marcus one afternoon in the hallway outside the executive offices. Her expression was a mixture of suspicion and something that might have been approval. "I don't know what you did, but Ms. Sterling is different. It's like she's actually human now." Marcus just shrugged, didn't do anything. Patricia's eyes narrowed. "People don't change without reason, Mr. Hayes. I've worked for Victoria Sterling for 7 years. I've never seen her smile at a staff meeting. Yesterday she laughed, actually laughed, at a joke about quarterly projections." She paused, studying him. "So either you did something or something happened, and I intend to figure out which." Marcus felt the first stirrings of unease. He and Victoria had been careful. No interactions at work beyond the professional minimum, no indication that they saw each other outside the office. But maybe Patricia was more observant than he'd given her credit for. 2 months after that first Saturday pizza afternoon, Victoria invited them over for dinner. She'd spent the whole day cooking, she admitted sheepishly, following recipes with the same meticulous attention she brought to business proposals. The food was slightly burned but edible, and Emma declared everything delicious with the generous spirit of a child who sensed the effort mattered more than the execution. After dinner, while Emma was distracted by a movie in the living room, Victoria and Marcus found themselves alone in the kitchen, washing dishes side by side. It felt domestic and comfortable, like something they'd been doing for years instead of weeks. Victoria's voice came suddenly, cutting through the quiet. "I talked to my brother, told him I need to stop hiding. We're having dinner next week, him and his family. It's been almost 2 years since I've seen my nephews." Marcus felt proud of her, though he wasn't sure he had the right to feel that way. "That's good. Family matters." Victoria set the plate she was washing in the drying rack and turned to face him, leaning against the counter. "I couldn't have done this without you, without Emma. You gave me something I'd forgotten existed, a reason to try, hope that maybe I could be more than my worst day." Her voice dropped lower, more vulnerable. "I know this is complicated. I'm your boss. You're my employee. We probably shouldn't be." She gestured vaguely between them, unable or unwilling to name what was growing in the space they shared. Marcus dried his hands on a towel, taking his time, thinking about what he wanted to say. "I spent 4 years locked away too, convinced that moving forward meant betraying Sarah's memory. But grief isn't loyalty, Victoria. And healing isn't forgetting, it's just choosing to keep living anyway." He stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes, to notice the way she was holding her breath. "Whatever this is, friend or something more, I think we're allowed to find out. I think we're allowed to be happy again, even if it feels wrong at first. Especially if it feels wrong at first." Victoria's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling too. "I'm scared of wanting this, of it being taken away, of history repeating itself." Marcus understood that fear intimately. It lived in his chest, too, a constant whisper that anything good was temporary, that love was just setting yourself up for loss. But he'd learned something important over the past few months, watching his daughter grow braver and watching Victoria emerge from her self-imposed exile. Being scared means we're still alive, means we still have something worth protecting. I'd rather be scared and trying than safe and alone. Victoria let out a shaky breath, and then, before either of them could overthink it, she closed the distance between them and kissed him. It was tentative and sweet, tasting of hope and possibility, and the strange courage it took to let yourself be vulnerable again. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. So we try. Marcus thought about Emma in the next room, about the rainbow drawings covering the Victoria's refrigerator, about two people who'd lost everything learning to build something new from the rubble. Yeah, we try. The next morning at work, Patricia's face was stone when Marcus arrived. She intercepted him before he could even reach the service elevator. Miss Sterling, we need to talk. It's urgent. Her voice was clipped, professional, but there was something underneath. Concern, maybe, or warning. Marcus followed her to a small conference room where Victoria was already waiting, her expression carefully neutral, but her hands gripping the edge of the table too tightly. There's been a development. Someone leaked photos. Patricia pulled up an image on the conference room screen. Marcus and Victoria at the park with Emma, taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. The three of them were laughing, Victoria's hand on Emma's shoulder, Marcus standing close enough that it was obvious they were together. An anonymous tip was sent to the board. Two members have called an emergency meeting. They're citing conflict of interest and compromised judgment. Victoria's jaw tightened. Who sent them? Patricia shook her head. Anonymous email routed through multiple servers, untraceable. But someone wants this relationship public, and they want you held accountable for it. Marcus felt ice settle in his stomach. This was what he'd been afraid of. Not just gossip, but actual consequences. Victoria could lose her position, her company, and it would be his fault for crossing a line he'd known better than to cross. I'll resign, tell the board it's over, that it was a mistake. Victoria cut him off, her voice sharp. No, we're not doing that. We're not lying, and you're not falling on your sword for me. She stood, squaring her shoulders. Schedule the board meeting. I'll handle this. The emergency board session was called for the following afternoon. Marcus wasn't present, but Victoria told him everything afterward, her voice tired, her eyes haunted. Harold Beckman, a board member in his 60s with connections to old Chicago money, had led the charge. This relationship compromises your ability to lead. A maintenance worker? Really, Victoria? This looks like a breakdown, not a romance. Victoria had responded with ice in her voice. My personal life is not your concern. My performance is. The company's performance is. Both are at record highs. But Beckman had pressed, you've been talking to Daniel, haven't you? She'd said it as a statement, not a question. Beckman hadn't denied it. Victoria's brother James had stood up then, his face flushed with anger. This is a coup attempt. My sister built this company from nothing. Her personal life is none of your business. But other board members had wavered. A vote was scheduled, 2 weeks from now. A confidence vote on Victoria's leadership. Victoria showed up at Marcus's apartment that evening, something she'd never done before. He opened the door to find her standing there in the clothes she'd worn to the board meeting, looking devastated and small in a way that made his chest ache. Maybe I should just resign. Save you and Emma from this mess. Marcus pulled her inside, closing the door. Don't you dare. Don't let them win. His voice was fiercer than he'd intended. This is about your ex-husband trying to control you. An old man scared of a woman who doesn't need them. Victoria sank onto his couch, her carefully constructed composure finally cracking. What if they're right? What if I am having some kind of breakdown? What if I'm using you and Emma to fill the hole Lily left, and it's not healthy, and I end up hurting Emma the way She couldn't finish. The way I hurt Lily. Marcus sat beside her, taking her hand. You're healing, that's different, and you're not alone anymore. The following week brought more complications. Word had spread through Sterling Technologies about the board meeting, about the CEO's inappropriate relationship with a maintenance worker. Marcus felt eyes on him everywhere he went, heard whispers that stopped when he entered a room. One of the facility's supervisors pulled him aside. "Hayes, you need to be careful. People are talking. Some are saying you're taking advantage, trying to sleep your way up." Marcus had kept his face neutral. Let them talk. But the words stung because part of him feared they might be true. Not that he was using Victoria, but that maybe he should have known better, should have maintained professional distance, should have protected her from exactly this kind of scrutiny. Emma noticed something was wrong. She'd always been perceptive, and now she asked questions Marcus didn't know how to answer. "Why are you sad, Daddy? Did the Queen change her mind about being our friend?" He'd pulled her close. "No, sweetheart. But sometimes when people care about each other people don't understand. They think it's wrong." Emma had frowned, processing this. But it's not wrong. She was lonely, and now she's not. That's good. If only the world operated on 6-year-old logic. 3 days after Victoria's visit, something happened that changed everything. Marcus was at work when his phone rang. An unfamiliar number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. The voice on the other end was cool, cultured, distinctly older. "Mr. Hayes, my name is Caroline Sterling. I'm Victoria's mother. I believe we need to talk." Marcus's blood went cold. Victoria had mentioned her mother only once, describing her as Boston old money, impossible to please, and convinced I destroyed the family reputation when I divorced Daniel. Caroline Sterling continued, "I'm in Chicago. I'd like to meet you. Today, if possible." It wasn't really a request. They met at a hotel restaurant downtown, the kind of place with white tablecloths and staff who spoke in hushed tones. Caroline Sterling was exactly what Marcus had imagined. Silver hair perfectly coiffed, pearls at her throat, expensive suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Her eyes were the same dark brown as Victoria's, but cold where her daughters were warm. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. "You're the maintenance man dating my daughter." Marcus met her gaze. "I'm the man who cares about her." Caroline's laugh was bitter. "How noble, and how convenient. Tell me, Mr. Hayes, what do you think happens when this little romance falls apart? Because it will. These things always do. And when it does, Victoria will lose everything. Her company, her reputation, possibly her sanity. She's already fragile. The accident, losing Lily, it broke something in her. This relationship is just another symptom of her instability." Marcus felt anger flare hot in his chest. "With respect, Mrs. Sterling, Victoria isn't unstable. She's healing. There's a difference." "Is there? Because from where I sit, my daughter is having a breakdown. She's attached herself to you and your child because they remind her of what she lost. That's not healthy, Mr. Hayes. That's pathological." Caroline leaned forward. "I've spoken with Daniel. He's willing to help. He says Victoria needs professional intervention, and I agree. This relationship with you is just going to make everything worse." The mention of Daniel sent warning bells clanging in Marcus's head. "Your daughter's ex-husband, the man who blamed her for their daughter's death and abandoned her when she needed him most. That's who you're trusting?" Caroline's expression didn't change. "Daniel has moved on. He has a new family, a stable life. He wants what's best for Victoria." "What's best for Victoria is letting her make her own choices." Marcus stood, done with this conversation. "I'm not going to stop seeing her because you disapprove. Neither is Emma. If you want to be part of Victoria's life, you need to accept that." Caroline's eyes narrowed. "Then you're a fool, Mr. Hayes, and you'll destroy her." That evening, Victoria called Marcus, her voice tight. "My mother's in town. She wants to see me. And Emma." Marcus's stomach dropped. "I met with her this afternoon. Victoria, she doesn't approve. She thinks I'm making you worse." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "She's wrong, but she's also my mother. I can't just ignore her." The visit happened on Sunday at Victoria's penthouse. Marcus had debated bringing Emma, but Victoria had insisted, "I want her to see that you and Emma are real, that this isn't some fantasy I've constructed." Caroline Sterling arrived precisely on time. her face a mask of polite disapproval. She greeted Victoria with a stiff embrace, assessed Marcus with a single dismissive glance, and then turned her attention to Emma. "So you're the little girl my daughter has been spending time with." Emma, bless her, didn't seem intimidated. "Are you Victoria's mommy? You look like her." Caroline's expression flickered. Surprise, maybe, or something softer. "Yes, I am." "Then you should be happy she's not sad anymore. Mommies want their kids to be happy." The simple logic seemed to stun Caroline into silence. But then she recovered, turning to Victoria. "We need to talk. Privately." Marcus took Emma to the living room, but the penthouse acoustics carried voices. "I don't know what you think you're doing, Victoria, but this man, he's a maintenance worker. You're a CEO. This looks desperate. It looks like you're having a breakdown." Victoria's voice came back steady. "I loved Lily with everything I had. When she died, I wanted to die too. But I survived, and then I stopped living." Marcus and Emma reminded me how to breathe. "If you can't accept that, then leave. You're making a mistake." "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make." The sound of heels on hardwood, then the slam of the door. Marcus and Emma returned to find Victoria standing at the window, shoulders rigid. "She'll come around, or she won't. Either way, I'm done living for other people's approval." But Marcus could see the cost of that defiance in the tremble of her hands, the tightness around her eyes. Standing up to her mother had taken something out of Victoria, some final reserve of strength she'd been hoarding. 3 days later, Emma's school called. There'd been an accident on the playground equipment. Emma had fallen from the monkey bars, hit her head. An ambulance was on the way to Children's Memorial Hospital. Marcus dropped everything. His hands shook so badly he could barely hold his phone to call Victoria. She was in a critical board strategy meeting, but Patricia put him through immediately. "Emma's hurt. Hospital. I'm on my way there now." He heard Victoria's sharp intake of breath, heard her say something to the room, and then, "I'm coming." "Which hospital?" "You don't have to. You have your meeting." "I'm coming." She arrived 10 minutes after Marcus, abandoning her board meeting mid-presentation. The executives would be furious. Beckman would have more ammunition, but Victoria didn't seem to care. She walked straight to Marcus in the emergency waiting room, her face pale. "Any news?" He shook his head, unable to speak past the fear lodged in his throat. This was Sarah all over again. The hospital smell, the waiting, the crushing possibility of loss. His mind kept supplying terrible scenarios, each worse than the last. Victoria sat beside him, took his hand, and held on. They didn't talk. There was nothing to say. They just existed in that awful liminal space where everything hung in the balance. After what felt like hours but was probably only 40 minutes. A doctor emerged. "Emma Hayes?" Marcus shot to his feet. "That's my daughter." The doctor smiled. "She's going to be fine. Concussion, fractured wrist, but no serious damage. We're keeping her overnight for observation, but kids are resilient. She'll heal quickly." The relief hit Marcus so hard his knees nearly buckled. Victoria's hand tightened on his, and when he looked at her, tears were streaming down her face. They were allowed in to see Emma shortly after. She was groggy from pain medication, her left wrist in a cast, but she smiled when she saw them. "Hi, Daddy." "Hi, Victoria. You both came." Emma's good hand reached for both of them, pulling them close. Marcus sat on one side of the bed, Victoria on the other, and his daughter looked at them with sleepy contentment. "I knew you'd both come." After Emma drifted off to sleep, Victoria excused herself. Marcus found her 10 minutes later in the hallway outside Emma's room. She was leaning against the wall, her whole body shaking, breath coming in short gasps. "Victoria, I can't do this. I can't lose another child." The words came out strangled. "This is what happened with Lily. Hospital. And then, Marcus pulled her against him, feeling her panic like a physical thing. "Emma's alive. She's okay. This isn't 5 years ago. This is different." But Victoria was somewhere else, lost in trauma that had been triggered by hospital sounds and antiseptic smells and the terror of a child in danger. What if next time she's not okay? What if I bring bad luck? What if everything I touch turns to... "Stop, look at me." Marcus cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You are not bad luck. You are not cursed. You lost Lily, and that's the worst thing that could ever happen. But you didn't cause it. The truck driver caused it. Random chance caused it, not you. Victoria's sobs were quiet but devastating. Marcus held her while she shattered, thinking about how trauma could lie dormant for years and then ambush you when you least expected it. Emma's accident had ripped open wounds Victoria had been trying so hard to heal, showed her how paper-thin the line was between ordinary life and unbearable loss. They stayed at the hospital overnight. Marcus refused to leave Emma, and Victoria refused to leave them. Around 2 in the morning, as Marcus was dozing in the chair beside Emma's bed, footsteps in the hallway made him open his eyes. A man stood in the doorway, mid-30s, expensive suit despite the hour, dark hair and sharp features that might have been handsome if not for the calculating coldness in his eyes. He looked at Marcus, then at Victoria curled in the other chair, and something like satisfaction crossed his face. Victoria, we need to talk. It's about what's best for everyone. Victoria's head came up, her eyes widening with recognition and something that looked like dread. Marcus tensed, a protective instinct rising sharp and immediate. How did you even know? The man smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. I have friends watching out for Victoria's interests. I'm Daniel Whitmore, Victoria's ex-husband. He stepped into the room uninvited. This situation proves exactly what I've been saying. Victoria, you're not thinking clearly. You abandoned a critical board meeting. For what? A maintenance worker's daughter who fell on a playground. This is exactly the kind of erratic behavior that concerns me. Victoria stood, her exhaustion replaced by something harder. Get out, Daniel. I can't watch you self-destruct. You need help, and I'm here to make sure you get it. He pulled papers from his jacket. I've filed a petition for psychiatric evaluation. The board supports it. Your mother supports it. There's a hearing in 5 days. Marcus moved to stand between Daniel and Victoria, every military instinct he'd thought he'd left behind suddenly coming online. She told you to leave. Daniel assessed him with barely concealed contempt. The maintenance man, playing hero, how touching. He turned back to Victoria. You're destroying your life. Can't you see that? This relationship, the way you're acting, it's not healthy. Let me help you. Help me? You abandoned me when Lily died. You blamed me, divorced me, and moved on to a new family in less than a year. Now you want to help? Victoria's voice was steel. Get out of this hospital, Daniel, and stay away from me. Daniel's expression hardened. You have 5 days to come to your senses. After that, the courts will decide if you are competent to run your own company. He left, and the silence he left behind felt poisonous. Victoria sank back into her chair, all the fight draining out of her. He's going to take everything. The company, my reputation, everything I've built. Marcus crouched beside her chair. We'll fight this. Together. But even as he said it, he felt the weight of what they were up against. Daniel Whitmore had money, connections, board members on his side. He had Victoria's own mother supporting his claim. And he had evidence, the photos, the abandoned board meeting, the erratic behavior. Marcus looked at his sleeping daughter, her small hand in a case, her face peaceful in medicated dreams. He'd brought this into their lives, the scrutiny, the danger, the complications. Maybe Caroline had been right. Maybe he was destroying Victoria just by being in her orbit. The hospital wouldn't let Victoria stay after Daniel's departure. Visiting hours were over, family only. Marcus watched her walk to the elevator, her shoulders carrying a weight that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. She turned back once, and the look she gave him was something he'd remember for the rest of his life. Gratitude mixed with terror, mixed with the awful certainty that everything was about to fall apart. Emma was discharged the next morning with instructions for rest and follow-up appointments. She chattered happily about the nurses and the hospital food and how the doctor said her cast could be any color she wanted. She'd chosen purple, naturally. Marcus carried her to the car, trying to match her enthusiasm while his mind churned through everything Daniel had said. 5 days until the hearing. 5 days to prove Victoria wasn't having a breakdown, that their relationship wasn't evidence of her instability. 5 days to somehow fight a man with unlimited resources and powerful allies. Mrs. Rodriguez met them at the apartment, her weathered face creasing with concern when she saw the cast. Emma launched into the story immediately, adding dramatic flourishes that hadn't actually happened. Marcus let his daughter talk while he checked his phone. 3 missed calls from Victoria, 1 text. Need to see you? Tonight after Emma's asleep? He texted back, come over, we'll figure this out. But when Victoria arrived that evening, slipping through his door like she was afraid someone might be watching, she didn't look like a woman ready to fight. She looked like someone who'd already surrendered. Maybe I should just resign, step down from the company, give Daniel what he wants. Her voice was flat, defeated. It would save Emma from being dragged into this. Save you from losing your job. Save everyone from... No. Marcus's voice came out harder than he'd intended. You're not doing that. You're not letting him win. But what if he's right? What if I am using you and Emma to replace what I lost? What if I'm so desperate to fill the lily-shaped hole in my life that I can't see I'm hurting people? She sank onto his couch, burying her face in her hands. The board meeting I abandoned, that was critical strategy. Millions of dollars in negotiations. I walked out because a child I barely know got hurt. What kind of CEO does that? The kind who's human. The kind who cares about people more than profit margins. Marcus sat beside her. You chose a scared kid over a business deal. That makes you more fit to lead, not less. Victoria's laugh was bitter. Try telling that to Harold Beckman in the board. They're going to crucify me. And they should. I've been distracted, unfocused. Everything Daniel said is true. Everything Daniel said is designed to make you doubt yourself. But Marcus could see his words weren't landing. Victoria had spent 5 years building walls, and now those walls were collapsing inward, crushing her under their weight. 3 days before the hearing, Marcus was fixing a ventilation issue in the East Wing when Patricia Chen found him. She looked around to make sure they were alone, then pressed a flash drive into his hand. I've been with Victoria for 7 years. I know what a breakdown looks like, and this isn't it. Patricia's voice was urgent, almost angry. I've documented everything: company performance metrics, employee satisfaction scores, innovation benchmarks. Every indicator shows Victoria's leadership has gotten stronger over the past 3 months, not weaker. Take this to the hearing. Marcus stared at the flash drive. Why are you helping? Because I was wrong about you. I thought you were taking advantage. But watching her these past months, she's been more present, more effective, more herself than she's ever been. Patricia's expression softened slightly. And because Daniel Whitmore is a manipulative bastard who destroyed her once, I'm not letting him do it again. That night, Marcus sat with Victoria and James Sterling, Victoria's brother, who'd flown in from the New York office for the hearing. James spread the contents of the flash drive across Victoria's dining table while going through their strategy. Patricia's data is solid, but it's not enough. We need character witnesses, people who can testify to your competence. James looked at Marcus. I also need to know who you are, really are, because the first thing Daniel's lawyers will do is tear you apart, questioning your motives, your background, your intentions. Marcus felt the old discomfort rising. I'm nobody, just a maintenance worker. That's not true, though, is it? James pulled out a folder. I had someone look into your background. Army Corps of Engineers, honorable discharge, specialized in structural engineering. Commendations for problem solving under pressure. So why are you fixing pipes in a Chicago office building? Marcus's jaw tightened. Because after my wife died, I needed something simple. Something where I could keep my head down and focus on raising Emma. The Army didn't feel like the place for a grieving single father. But you're not just a maintenance worker. You're a trained engineer. That matters. James's eyes were sharp. It shows you're not some opportunist trying to marry into money. You chose a simpler life because it's what your daughter needed. That's character. Victoria had been quiet through this exchange, but now she spoke. It doesn't matter what Marcus is or isn't. The problem is me. Daniel's right. I did abandon a board meeting. I have been distracted. I can't argue my way out of facts. Then we change the narrative. You didn't abandon a meeting out of instability. You left because you're finally learning to be human again after 5 years of emotional shutdown. James looked at his sister. Which do you think looks worse to the public? A CEO who cares about people or a CEO who's an unfeeling robot? Daniel's trying to use your humanity against you. We flip it and make it your strength. But Victoria wasn't convinced. Marcus could see it in the way she held herself, the way she avoided meeting anyone's eyes. She'd been fighting for so long, fighting grief, fighting guilt, fighting the voice in her head that said she didn't deserve happiness. Now Daniel had given that voice external validation, and Victoria was too exhausted to keep resisting. The next morning, Emma asked the question Marcus had been dreading. Is Victoria coming to visit today? He knelt down to her level. Not today, sweetheart. She's dealing with some grown-up problems. Emma's face fell. Did we make her sad again? No, baby, never. But sometimes when people care about each other, other people try to make it hard for them. Emma processed this with her usual serious expression. Like the mean king in the story, the one who wants to keep the queen locked in the tower? Marcus hadn't realized his bedtime stories had been so transparent. Something like that. But we're going to help her win, right? That's what heroes do. If only fighting for someone was as simple as childhood stories made it seem. That afternoon, Victoria called. Her voice sounded hollow, scraped clean of hope. I need to show you something. Can you come to the penthouse alone? Mrs. Rodriguez agreed to watch Emma. Marcus made the drive feeling like he was heading toward an ending rather than a beginning. Victoria let him in without a word. The penthouse looked different, cluttered for the first time since he'd known her. Boxes were scattered across the living room floor, their contents spilling out. Children's clothes, toys, books with worn spines. I couldn't sleep last night. Kept thinking about what Daniel said, about using you and Emma to replace Lily. Victoria's voice was mechanical. So I decided to face it. Went into storage, the closet where I've kept everything for 5 years. Everything I couldn't bear to look at. She held out a small journal, its pink cover decorated with stick figure drawings. This was Lily's. I bought it for her right before the accident. She just learned to write. I haven't been able to open it since she died. Marcus took the journal carefully, feeling the weight of grief and memory and 5 years of avoidance in his hands. Victoria nodded at him. Permission, or maybe a plea for him to be the one to look first. He opened it to the last entry, dated the day before Lily died. The handwriting was childish but careful, each letter formed with concentration. Today, Mommy was huaitan. She had to work a lot, but I'm not mad. I told her I love her no matter what. She hugged me so tight and cried a little. She said, I love you more than the whole world, Lilybug. Tomorrow is my ballet show. I'm going to dance so good so Mommy smiles again. When I grow up, I want Mommy to be happy, even if I'm not there. She should be happy. That's what I wish. Marcus felt his throat close. He looked up to find Victoria staring at the journal like it might burn her. Read the rest, the earlier entries. He flipped through pages of childhood observations, drawings of rainbows, hearts with Mommy and Lily forever, written inside, a stick figure family. One entry caught his eye. Mommy came to my school today. All the kids said she's pretty. I'm lucky. I made Mommy a picture of a rainbow. She put it on the fridge. She said it made her feel better. Victoria's voice cracked. Lily wanted me to be happy, even if she wasn't there. That was her last wish, for me to smile again. She gestured at the rainbow drawings covering her refrigerator, Emma's cheerful additions to a home that had been sterile and empty. And here's your daughter doing the exact same thing Lily did, making rainbows to help sad people feel better. Don't you see? This isn't coincidence. This isn't me using Emma to replace Lily. This is... She couldn't finish. Marcus set the journal down and pulled her close. This is Lily giving you permission. Permission to live. Permission to love again. Permission to let someone else in. Victoria sobbed against his chest. 5 years of guilt and grief and self-punishment finally breaking through the dam she'd constructed. Marcus held her while she shattered, thinking about Emma's simple wisdom, that the people we lose become stars, that they watch over us, that they send us new people to love so we're never alone. When Victoria finally pulled back, her eyes were red but clearer than he'd seen them in days. I've been honoring Lily's memory by being miserable. That's not what she would have wanted. She was 4 years old and she understood that better than I did. So what do you want to do? Victoria took a shaky breath. I want to fight. Not just for the company, but for this, for us, for the chance to actually live instead of just existing. The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. James coordinated with Patricia to gather evidence. They compiled testimonials from employees, financial reports showing Victoria's competence, expert opinions on grief and healing. Marcus's military records were added to the file, proof that he wasn't some nobody trying to take advantage, but a trained professional who'd chosen a quieter life for his daughter's sake. The morning of the hearing, an email appeared in Victoria's inbox. The sender was anonymous. The subject line simply, regarding Daniel Whitmore. The attachment contained financial records showing Daniel's new business venture, funded partially by Sentinel Corp, Sterling Technologies' biggest competitor. There was a contract, partially redacted, but damning enough. Daniel was being paid to destabilize Victoria's leadership. The goal was to force a sale of the company. A second email arrived moments later. Sometimes mothers protect their daughters in unexpected ways. Use this wisely. CS. Victoria stared at the screen. My mother? Marcus leaned over her shoulder, scanning the documents. She signed Daniel's petition, but she also gave us the ammunition to destroy him. She can't publicly support me. Social standing, family reputation, all the old money politics she's spent her life maintaining, but she won't let Daniel take my company. There was something both heartbreaking and hopeful in that realization, that Caroline Sterling loved her daughter enough to help from the shadows, even if she couldn't stand beside her in the light. The hearing was held in a corporate law office downtown, all glass and steel and uncomfortable modern furniture. Daniel's lawyers were there, sleek and predatory. Harold Beckman represented the concerned board members. A psychiatrist sat ready to testify about Victoria's supposed instability, and Daniel himself looking confident in an expensive suit like he'd already won. The proceedings started with Daniel's side presenting their case, the abandoned board meeting. The photographs of Victoria with Marcus and Emma, character witnesses who testified to her emotional distance before and her erratic warmth now. The psychiatrist spoke in clinical terms about pathological grief and transference. Then it was their turn. James presented the company performance data, record profits, increased innovation, improved employee retention. Patricia testified about Victoria's leadership, her voice steady and strong. Other employees followed, telling stories of a CEO who finally seemed to see them as people, not resources. When Marcus was called to testify, Daniel's lawyer went for the throat. Mr. Hayes, you're in a relationship with Ms. Sterling, correct? Yes. And she's your employer? She owns the company I work for, yes. Don't you think that's inappropriate? A maintenance worker and a CEO? Marcus met the lawyer's eyes. I think two people finding each other after profound loss is human. My wife died 4 years ago. Victoria's daughter died 5 years ago. We understand each other's grief in a way most people can't. Or you saw an opportunity, a wealthy, vulnerable woman you could manipulate. I saw a woman crying alone on her kitchen floor on her dead daughter's birthday. I saw someone who'd been drowning for 5 years and finally found a reason to come up for air. Marcus's voice was steady. My 6-year-old daughter drew her a rainbow because she could see what everyone else missed, that Victoria Sterling wasn't an ice queen or a robot. She was just someone who'd forgotten how to ask for help. The lawyer shifted tactics. You're just a maintenance worker, though. What could you possibly offer someone like Ms. Sterling? I offer what everyone needs and no amount of money can buy. Someone who sees them, really sees them, not just what they can provide or produce. I offered friendship when she had none. I offered my daughter's joy when Victoria had forgotten what joy looked like. And yes, eventually I offered love. Not because I wanted something from her, but because she deserved it. James stood then, dropping the financial bombshell. Speaking of wanting something, let's discuss what Daniel Whitmore wants. He presented the documents, the contract with Sentinel Corp, the payment records. The room went silent as the implications sank in. Daniel wasn't concerned about Victoria's mental health. He was being paid to remove her from power so her company could be acquired. Beckman's face went white. Daniel, is this true? Daniel's composure finally cracked. That's out of context. It's not, I'm legitimately concerned about Victoria. You're concerned about a seven-figure payout when this company gets sold. James's voice was ice. You tried to have your ex-wife declared incompetent so you could profit from her downfall. That's not concern, that's criminal. The hearing dissolved into chaos. Daniel's lawyers tried to regroup, but the damage was done. The psychiatrist's testimony suddenly seemed like paid propaganda. The board members who'd supported Daniel looked betrayed and furious. The chairman called a recess. When they reconvened an hour later, his face was grave. Ms. Sterling, this panel finds no evidence of mental incompetence. Your leadership of Sterling Technologies will continue unimpeded. He turned to Daniel. Mr. Whitmore, your relationship with Sentinel Corp represents a conflict of interest. You're to remove yourself from all matters involving Sterling Technologies, effective immediately. Daniel stood, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. He looked at Victoria with something like hatred. You'll regret this. But Victoria didn't flinch. No, I won't, because for the first time in 5 years, I'm living instead of just surviving, and you can't take that away from me. Daniel stormed out. The hearing ended, and Marcus watched Victoria accept congratulations from her brother, from Patricia, from board members who now seemed embarrassed they'd ever doubted her. She handled it all with grace, but Marcus could see the exhaustion underneath. When they finally left the building, stepping out into Chicago spring sunshine, Victoria stopped on the sidewalk and just breathed. Marcus stood beside her, not touching, just present. I keep waiting for it to feel like victory. It just feels like survival. Her voice was quiet, like I escaped something terrible, but I'm still shaking from how close it came. That's normal. Give it time. They walked to where his truck was parked, and for a moment they just stood there in companionable silence. Then Victoria turned to him. Thank you for fighting, for not running when this got complicated. Where else would I go? 6 months later, the world looked different. Victoria had kept her word about scaling back, delegating more, trusting her team, leaving the office at reasonable hours. She saw a therapist twice a week, working through layers of guilt and grief that had calcified over 5 years. Marcus had been promoted to facilities manager, moved to a different reporting structure to satisfy HR requirements. Emma thrived, her cast long gone, her collection of rainbow drawings expanding to fill both Marcus's apartment and Victoria's penthouse. On a Sunday morning in late spring, they went to the park, their ritual now as fixed as sunrise. Emma ran ahead to the duck pond while Marcus and Victoria walked behind, their hands loosely linked. The Chicago morning was bright and clear, the kind of day that made you believe winter would never return. Emma's shriek of delight cut through the air. Look, a rainbow! A brief morning shower had passed while they weren't paying attention, and now the sky held a perfect arc of color stretching from one end of the park to the other. Emma was jumping up and down, pointing, her joy so pure it hurt to witness. Victoria stopped walking. Marcus felt her hand tighten on his. Do you remember what I told you? About Lily believing rainbows were magic bridges? I remember. She thought they connected sad people to happy ones. That if you found yourself under a rainbow, it meant you were transitioning from sadness to joy. Victoria looked at him, her eyes bright. I think she was right. Emma came running back, breathless and excited. Did you see? Did you see? Lily and Mommy Sarah are saying hi. She grabbed both their hands, tugging them toward the rainbow. Make a wish. You have to make a wish on the rainbow. Marcus looked at Victoria. They'd been dancing around something for months now, the shape their future might take, whether what they had was temporary comfort or something more permanent. The hearing had forced them to defend their relationship publicly, but they'd never really defined it privately. I don't have a ring. Can't afford the kind you probably deserve. Marcus's voice was rough with emotion. Victoria started to protest, but he held up his hand. But I have this. He pulled 3 items from his pocket, his father's dog tags, worn smooth with age. Sarah's wedding band, the simple gold band she'd worn for 8 years, and Lily's bracelet, the one Victoria had been wearing the night he found her crying on her kitchen floor. 3 people we loved. 3 reminders that love doesn't end, it just changes form and continues. He met Victoria's eyes. Will you marry me? Build a family with Emmy and me? Not to replace what we lost, but to honor it by moving forward. Victoria's tears were already falling. Yes, obviously yes. Emma squealed and threw her arms around both of them. I knew it. Can I be flower girl? Can we get a doom? Can... They were both laughing now, pulling Emma into a hug that felt like shelter and home, and the beginning of something neither of them had thought they'd get a second chance at. The wedding was small 3 months later, just 40 people on Sterling Technologies' rooftop garden. James officiated, his voice steady as he talked about second chances and the courage it took to love again after loss. Patricia cried openly. Caroline Sterling attended, stiff and uncomfortable in the back row, but when the ceremony ended, she approached Victoria and said simply, "Your father would have been proud." It wasn't forgiveness or acceptance, but it was something. A crack in the wall, room for future thawing. Emma stood between them during the vows, holding a bouquet of rainbow-colored flowers. When the officiant asked if anyone had words to share, Emma stepped forward with the seriousness of someone given an important task. We're not sad people who got happy. We're people who were sad and learned to be happy together. That's different. That's better. Lily and Mommy Sarah would be proud. The reception was simple. Good food, better wine, speeches that made people laugh and cry in equal measure. As the sun set over Chicago, Marcus and Victoria stood at the edge of the rooftop garden, Emma between them. Caroline Sterling approached, stiff but determined. I was wrong about him, about this. You're happy. That matters more than... She didn't finish, but Victoria understood. Thank you, Mother. Emma tugged on Marcus's sleeve. Do we all live together now, like a real family? Marcus laughed. Yeah, sweetheart. One family. Emma considered this. A maintenance man, a CEO, and a girl who makes rainbows. That's a weird family. Victoria pulled them both close. The best kind of weird. The string lights swayed in the evening breeze. Music drifted up from the street below. And 3 people who'd survived losses that should have destroyed them stood together under the Chicago sky, proving that sometimes the most important doors are the ones you open by mistake, and the most important people are the ones who see you at your worst and choose to stay.